If you are a woman that feels like people are always telling you, you need to find your purpose or you need to set those goals, and it just feels like one more stressful, overwhelming thing that you need to add to your to-do list. Well, Kate today is going to really reframe that with you by sharing this concept she calls goals with soul, that I think is incredibly beautiful. And also reducing this unbelievable, unnecessary stress around this desire to find our purpose. So let's jump in and have this conversation. Hey everyone, welcome back to Work Life Harmony. I have a guest today, Kate House, that I am so thrilled to have on the show. We share a lot of similarities in kind of what we like to support women with, but Kate comes at this from a very different way. So I'm excited to learn from you. Welcome to the show, Kate. I would love it if you would introduce yourself and let everyone know a little bit about you.
For anybody who I haven't connected with before, I'm Kate House, and I support high achieving women who have little time for themselves, set, track, and actually achieve their goals with soul. And I like to say we do it with both confidence and clarity. Now, I was not born a unicorn that knew how to do this. It's been a journey. Yeah, I had a quarter life crisis about 10 years ago, right at 25. And kind of had that moment of something has to change. I woke up and I felt really unfulfilled in my life. I was, oldest child, straight A student, Phi Beta Kappa in college, right? Like I got the job I was quote supposed to have, right? I was doing all the things, I was checking all the boxes, and I was living into a lot of what I like to think of as shoulds, the things I quote should do. But it wasn't in alignment for me. And so I went through a pretty radical transformation. And my hope is to help other women maybe not have to do a total 180 and instead lean into these kind of 1% changes over time. And so that's kind of the heart of what I do is supporting women in living by design and not by default.
Oh, that's so wonderful. And I love you say the 1% changes. I think we often fall into this trap of thinking, well, in order to make a change, like it's got to be everything, right? And
Yeah.
that's not sustainable, realistic. The thought of
Mhm.
it just makes me go, no way. Now, I know you talk a lot about having goals with soul. What does that mean?
So I created this framework as a result of my experiences over the last 10 years. I realized that when I was 25, the goals I were pursuing they just weren't mine. They were the
Mm.
things I thought I was supposed to do, but they didn't leave me feeling fulfilled at the end of the day. At the flip side, I was having like stress nightmares about my work email crashing. I was like, there's got to be more in a life than this. And so for me, a goal with soul, it's four things. And I like to think of it as it's a little different. We've all learned about SMART goals. Absolutely, there's a time and place for them, but I think
Yeah,
they
it's
come
kind
from
of snooze fest.
right.
Corporate. Yeah.
It's corporate. It's very masculine, I think.
Yes,
And I think
100%.
right. And for us women who are maybe moving through a season of overwhelm or we're a high achiever doing all the things, but we're like, gosh, if I miss one day, all the balls I keep in the air are gonna fall, right? And so I wanted a system where we could set goals that we can continue to pursue even amidst the fullness of our lives. So to me, a goal with soul, the first part of it is it's aspirational. So future Megan, future Kate, she's totally got this. She's like, no problem. I could do this without a doubt. Current Kate, maybe it gives her like a little bit of butterflies. Like James Clear talks in Atomic Habits about setting goals that are 4% outside of our comfort zone. And so
Right.
it's aspirational. It's 4% out of your comfort zone. It's not so far out of your comfort zone that you're going to feel overwhelmed and never get started. It's just enough that you get to grow in the pursuit of it. So, for example, right now, my goal with Soul is I'm writing my first book. And my current goal with Soul is the first draft. Because if I think about the whole process, like
Right.
that will keep me stuck in overwhelm and procrastination. And so instead, draft one.
Well, and I like that you're talking about, I think, just the fact that you are framing the first draft as a goal, whereas most people would say the published book is the goal. The first draft is a step towards there. But I love that you're even saying, no, we're defining even that as a goal, not a step that's part of another goal that does feel a lot bigger. Even that subtle shift is really good.
Yeah, it's just that subtle mindset shift. And then it gives you permission to celebrate yourself along the way, right? And then we get something I like to call in my coaching practice success momentum, right? So we get that first win, we get the first draft done, get to
Mhm.
celebrate it, we feel successful, and then we move on to, the editing phase or whatever the case might be for your personal goal with soul. So the first part of our goal with soul is aspirational. On the flip side of that, our goal with soul is attainable. And by that, I mean, if you show up consistently for the next 6 months, for the next year, you can do it. You don't have to have it done yesterday, which most of us high achievers are like, I want it done and I want it done yesterday. But we have to have some flexibility in our lives. Before we hit record, Meg and I were both like, oh, this is a great day. All of our kids are healthy. The dogs are healthy and crated. We can have this conversation in the quiet, right? But that's not always the case. Sometimes we have
Right.
days where, the kids wake up with a fever or somebody has a tummy bug, right? And all of a sudden your day feels very different than before. And so I think a goal with soul, it's attainable because we're consistently working towards it over time. And so I like to say, like, more days than not is something I've learned on my journey. And so it doesn't have to be every single day. If you have a day you wake up and you're like, oh man, stuff is hitting the fan, like, that's okay.
Yeah.
We're just
I
going to
love
start
that
again
idea of
tomorrow.
more days than not instead of it has to be 5 days or it has to be 4 days, just more days than not.
Yeah. Right. It's so freeing. And then it gives you that flexibility for the days when you're like, oh man, like, we have a grandparent we help care for who's in failing health, right? So if you have a day where you're like, this person needs me, of course I'm going to be there. Of course. And so if that means the work I was going to do on my book today gets pushed off until tomorrow and I wake up a little extra early to get it in, that's totally fine. So our goal is soul. It's aspirational, it's attainable. I think one of the most important parts is the third part, it's meaningful. And I like to kind of jokingly say you can't spell meaningful without the word me. But for me, this was the part of the goal
That's
setting
not about
process.
other people, right?
Exactly. This is the part I was missing for the first 25 years of my life. It was like, I've been set a goal and I knew if I just kept working towards it, I can get it done. Right. But then I didn't feel great because it wasn't meaningful for me. And so that is the most important part. So for me right now, writing a book feels exciting. It feels meaningful. It's the culmination of a lot of years of work I've put into this. Right. But you may be listening to this and you're like, gosh, Kate, I'm in a season of life where I finally have a little extra time for myself that I've carved out. And I haven't done something just for fun in years. So, like,
Most women have not, sadly.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, your goal of soul might be learning an instrument, it might be learning how to crochet, it might be picking up a hobby you had as a kid that you absolutely loved. And you're like, gosh, I haven't painted or drawn something in 30 years.
Or read a book that wasn't to self-improve or do better at work or be a better mom or better whatever, like just for pleasure.
Just for fun. I started reading books for fun again. I'm a voracious reader, but I was reading all the self-help books, right? All the personal growth books. And so I started this thing a couple years ago. I called them buffer books. And I was like, okay, in between growth-oriented books, I'm just going to read a book for fun, like just for fun. And now I love those books so much that those are primarily what I read.
Yes.
And it brings me so much joy. So your goal with soul, it is meaningful to you personally. And so you don't have to justify it to anybody. Nobody else needs to get it. And maybe your goal with soul, like if you have people in your life who are maybe a little bit of a Debbie Downer, like you don't have to tell them, like
So true.
you can keep
Yes.
that goal with soul in your heart or share it with your partner or your best friend or your parent, but it's okay. You don't have to share it with the whole world, right?
It's for you. This
It's
isn't
for
about
you.
achieving something for others. Yes.
Exactly.
Love that.
It's about shifting from external validation to internal validation. And so we're aspirational, we're attainable, we're meaningful. And the final piece, and I think this is so important for us women, especially those of us who are moving through a season of overwhelm, is it's seasonally appropriate. And I don't mean like we're recording this in the fall. Like I mean like what season
Life
of
season.
yeah,
Yeah.
what season of life are you in? Like this season right now, for example, I can pursue the first draft of my book because for the first time ever, I have a kindergartner and a first grader, which means my kids are at school during the day.
Right.
Prior to that, I had one home with me or two home with me. I was a stay at home mom for many years. And so, writing a book in that season, I just would have felt frustrated. I would have felt defeated. I would have felt like I was, quote, falling behind because I didn't have the capacity, the time capacity, the mental capacity, the emotional capacity.
Well,
When
that
I
kind of ties back into your attainable, right? This
exactly,
is attainable, but maybe not this year. And
yes.
maybe I'm keeping that on the back burner for a different season of life.
Absolutely. And that is okay to do. I think sometimes
Yes.
we feel like, if I don't do this now, it's never going to happen. We've been like told this narrative and it's like, no, it's okay. Like you could put a pin in it. Write it down, like literally write it down or like mentally put it on a shelf and be like, I'm going to come back to you when I work through this health issue, when my parents are healthier, right? When my kids are in school, when I don't have a newborn or whatever the case might be.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be for forever. And so that's kind of my structure for goals. So aspirational, attainable, meaningful, and seasonally appropriate. And I think that just supports us women in such a, I don't know, just in a more abundant and heart
Oh, it's
filled
a lot.
way.
It's more feminine. It
Yeah.
feels less heavy. It's a much lighter way. Goal setting can feel heavy and also very overwhelming, right? We hear that it's
Mhm.
like, oh my gosh. And when I'm working with women on that, or we're having a call, what pains me is when someone will be like, well, I feel like my goals aren't big enough. And
Mm,
to your point, like this isn't about anybody else
no.
but yourself, right? And so one of the things that I think we both hear a lot of women talking about, which you brought up as well, is the overwhelm, right? And so when
Mhm.
it comes to supporting overwhelmed women, I take it more of that very pragmatic step-by-step
Mhm.
approach. Here's how we can get out of overwhelm. But you talk a lot about emotional overwhelm, which is very different than the never-ending task list that when you cross something off, you add 3 more, right? That's more that
Yeah.
physical, easy to see, tangible. What do you mean by emotional overwhelm? And
Mm.
then how do we work through that? What are the signs maybe you're dealing with that?
Oh, I love this question, Megan. So I think emotional overwhelm can happen when we are pouring so much of ourselves into our families, into our careers, if you choose to have one, into volunteering or caring for others, whatever it looks like. And we get to the end of the day and we're like, gosh, one, I'm exhausted. Two, I can't actually tell you what I did today.
I'm
and
exhausted, but I know I did a lot and I can't put a finger on what it is.
Right,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. And that's a frustrating place to be. And you're so tired that you're like, you hear that saying, like, you can't pour from an empty cup. And you're like, I am so empty. I can't even think about filling it up, right? Like, that is too much effort. And so I'm a holistically trained health coach. And I think a lot of this comes from a lack of caring for ourselves. And I don't mean self care, like, did you take a bubble bath or did you do a face mask?
God,
Like,
yeah.
you
No, no,
know,
no.
no, like, I'm talking about, like, did you drink water? Like, are you getting enough sleep, right? Are you moving your body not because you wanna look a certain way, but because you wanna feel a certain way? Like, as we're recording this, my desk I'm sitting right now, but it's a sit-stand desk, and I have a little walking pad, and so this morning I was editing some podcast episodes, and I walked 2 miles. They were slow miles, but I feel really good afterwards, right? And so
Mhm.
I like to think about this emotional overwhelm of like, how are you caring for yourself? And I give the example of the walking pad because how can we layer these practices of just taking care of baseline needs in a way that doesn't add to your overwhelm, but helps you feel better? So I have like a giant mason jar of water right here, and I always have a drink with me. I'm always drinking water, right? And that literally helps me feel better. If I feel really sluggish one day, maybe I stand at my desk while I do some of my work, and that actually helps me feel energized. And it's these kind of like we talked about before, these 1 degree shifts. And how can we feel like 1% better? Make this 1 degree shift so that we're caring for ourselves, not just as an afterthought at the end of the day, but throughout the day in these small, sustainable ways.
If you're listening and you're at a stage of life where you're home with younger kids or, even dinner time, I even found myself years ago, truly, like when you're talking about, we always take in the leftovers, where
Mhm.
more days than not, lunch or breakfast was literally the leftovers off my kid's plate.
Yeah,
And I
like
realized one day, I'm like, this needs to stop. I'm not putting any thought around what I'm putting in my mouth. I'm literally taking leftovers for
yeah.
a couple meals a day. And so I think even just that, right? If you're fixing a plate of food for a family member, take the extra 2 minutes and fix the separate plate of food for yourself for the things that nourish your body and not just grabbing the crumbs off of plates. But it's easy, it's quick, it's one less thing, right?
Yeah, totally. And I think that is another one of those little shifts that just reminds us like
Mhm.
you are worthy of caring for yourself, right? Like you don't literally have to eat the crumbs. Like as you share that, my brain immediately goes to like, the half a peanut butter sandwich that my son always leaves on his plate, and it's like, well, do you actually want to eat
You
that?
want
Right.
to have a leftover peanut butter sandwich?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Now, I know part of the work that you do is helping women really find their purpose. And I've seen a lot of interesting books about this. Some people call it your North Star.
Mhm.
And before we started recording, I was sharing there's a sitcom show that we watched for years called The Middle. I think it's a great show. And there was even an episode there where they were at church and the pastor was talking about the need to find your purpose, find your business. And so the mom of the family goes in a tailspin. Of course, the dad was like, I've got my purpose, I'm good. Well,
Yeah.
she goes in a tailspin of like, oh my gosh, I haven't found my purpose, right? And the whole episode, she's trying one thing after another in a jewelry making business and this, that, and helping this person doing that on this quest to find her purpose. And I see this come up in conversations sometimes on our monthly live coaching calls as well, where even just in the process of trying to find a personal goal to work towards, women don't even know where to start because they're like, our purpose. And I know I had a very pivotal day where realized my entire purpose in my life at that moment was in service to others. It was
Mm.
playing roles, being an employee, being a mom, being a caregiver, all of these other things. So I think for a lot of women, this idea of finding our purpose or our North Star, whatever people are calling it, feels like one more super stressful to do thing to have on our list. Are we overthinking it? What does this look like in your line of work and how you help women there?
Yeah, so I love that, right? Am I overthinking it? Like, gosh, how often do we overthink things?
All
And
day
so
long.
all day long. So
I'm world class at it.
yeah. So what if it gets to be simple? And what if we can I like to think of like visually, like sometimes we put purpose up on a pedestal. But what if we take it off the pedestal and we're like, how can we just make this part of who I am? And so I like to think of purpose as a number of things. One, you can have more than one purpose. Sometimes we think we have to have this one,
Goodness.
right?
I know, and it's stressful. I was even having a conversation with a gal on my team about it the other day because I was listening to a podcast about purpose. I'm like, I really got to find my purpose. I'm like, oh my gosh, it sounds so hard.
It sounds it's so stressful. And I think we can totally rewrite this. And so like one, permission giving. You can have more than one purpose. I think as women, especially, we can be talented at so many different things, right? And so you might have one sense of purpose in one season of life, and maybe it shifts in the future, and that's okay. Maybe you have more than one sense of purpose and you pursue both at the same time. That's awesome too. And sometimes like for me, I had this like light bulb moment when I had my quarter life crisis of like something has to change, but not all of us get this light bulb moment. Sometimes it's like a sunrise. It's like this slow kind of awakening and dawning. So just know, friend, like if this takes time for you, like I think that's actually really healthy. That's like it can be a really good thing. And I like to think of purpose as something that requires action, but not perfect action, right? So many of us, we want to try something new or we want to pursue something and we want to be amazing at it immediately, which is just not, I mean, perfect is an illusion. Like it's one of the mantras I do with my kids on the way to school every day, right? It can give us, it can be a guiding light. But when you start something new or you're trying something, you're approaching it, you're not going to be great at it. And that's okay. We're just taking kind of like messy action. And the reason I like taking action is because action creates clarity. And so you might not quite know what your purpose is, but you're like, I've identified some core values. It's community, it's being a leader, and it's loving myself well. And so then you can start to think about, well, what are some things I can actually do in my life that support those things and go try them. And sometimes you try something and you're like, that was great. I totally want to keep learning and leaning into that. Or you might try something and you're like, actually, or no. And sometimes that's even more helpful. But either way, it gives you clarity. And I think that's, to me, living by design, pursuing these goals with soul, it takes action. And action is what gets us clarity. And then repeated action over time is what helps us grow that confidence muscle. And so even though, here's an example. So when I had my quarter life crisis, I was like, I can't keep working this 9 to 5. My soul is dying. And so I became a yoga teacher, and the imposter syndrome or the inner critic in me was like, what are you doing? Like, you just finished this 4-year degree and now you're going to go be a yoga teacher. Like, what will people think? Right. And I had to be like,
Right.
thank you, but like, please be quiet. I'm going to do this anyways. And I became a yoga teacher and I taught yoga and I managed a studio for a number of years. Now, am I still a yoga teacher? No, I don't actively teach yoga right now. But was that a really important part of my journey where in hindsight, I can say, like, oh, I became a yoga teacher and then I became a holistic health coach. And then I started my podcast and now I host summits and I have coaching and I'm writing a book. They all connect. And
All
so,
do. Yeah.
right. And so I think a lot of
And I
times
love that. You're painting such a beautiful picture of there doesn't have to be the known end destination and that's all we're at. And I'm even thinking back, I thought my path out of corporate life was co-founding a software company, which I did back, several years ago, only to discover that was not it.
Mhm.
But what I took from that, what we learned from that, all of that, I would not be here at the Pink Bee without that. And so what I thought my purpose was then is not the same as now.
Yeah.
But I don't think I ever thought of it as a purpose either. But in looking back, I'm
Mhm.
like, oh no, I think there was that calling, that desire to go do something. And maybe we can just focus on that and not
Exactly.
the one, here it is for the rest of your life. This is the only reason you are here. You must do this thing
Right?
forever.
Because the thing
Yeah.
I think about being human is that we get to grow and change over time. And so to me, when I think about purpose, the question I'm actually asking myself is, what is the next right step? Because if I were to think, if 25-year-old me had sat down and was like, in 10 years, I want to be doing X, Y, and Z. Oh my gosh, talk about overwhelm. I would have never started. I would have been like, you're crazy. I don't know how to do that. Like if that wouldn't
Right.
have been in that aspirational attainable zone for me, right? But training to be a yoga teacher, getting all the weird words out of my mouth so that I could actually teach a class well. So like that I could do, right? And so and the cool thing is as you look back, like through my yoga teaching career, I learned how to command a room and have presence and teach and speak, not always eloquently, but I could get the words out. And then I brought that forward into my coaching and connecting with people, right? And then all of a sudden I was like, I have it on my heart to start a podcast. And I'm like, well, gosh, I've been talking in a room like I'm the
Right.
only one talking for years. So like I could talk to myself at the computer, sure. And
Yeah.
you take you can look back, and I think it's a way too of redefining what we think might be a quote failure. Instead, it's a way of failing forward. It's a way of looking back and saying,
To
like, yeah,
shift a step,
ye- yeah,
on there. What I love about all three of these, the goals with soul, thinking about emotional overwhelm and our purpose is that all of these are bringing to light that women really we deserve and we need to carve out and prioritize time and space that's just about us, right? All of those things are just about us,
Mhm.
not the roles that we play and what we're doing for others. And it's something I know I am constantly reminding myself on, right? And this is
Mhm.
why, even when I teach my planning processes, it's why very early in the planning stages, or when we're doing our weekly planning, is the things for you go on your
Mhm.
calendar before we fill it up with all the stuff that we are doing in service to other people. So I just think that the message that you're putting out there and the work that you're doing with women is very transformational and it is really needed in a time right now when
Mhm.
women in particular are just taking on more and more and more, which usually means the more we add on, what's being pushed out the back end is all this
Yeah.
stuff for ourselves, right?
Yeah. I get like goosebumps as you share that, right? Because like, yeah, we just forget to care for ourselves. And in the same way that you teach, like putting yourself on the calendar, I've taken that to like this next level because now with both my kids in school, so I drive them to school. Their school's about 20 minutes away. And I live in the small town where I went to college. And so I can use their gym as an alma mater, which is hilarious because I'm working out with like 18-year-olds. And I'm like, oh, I thought I was so old when I was at your stage in life. And
Yeah.
now I'm like, oh, you're such a baby. But I go and I work out. And sometimes that workout is like, I'm just going to do a really gentle walk on the treadmill. But I have this kind of time carved out for myself at the beginning of my day. And it's at 5 a.m., right? This is like 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning. And I carve that out and I don't open myself up for meetings until 11 a.m. And that way I can have that time for myself. Cause I know personally, if I don't pour into myself and movement for me just it's like medicine. It's just the thing that works for me. For somebody else, it might be meditating, it might be prayer, it might be, it
And
could
it
be
might be something at midday or in the evening. It can be
absolutely.
whatever,
Yeah.
works
But
for you.
gotta make that time for yourself and to have some flexibility, right? Like there may be days when it doesn't happen the way you think it's going to, and that's okay too. But more days
100%.
than not, we just keep showing up for ourselves, and then we can show up for others from just such a more abundant place.
Oh, so beautiful. Kate, where can people connect with you to learn more about Goals with Soul and all of this amazing work that you're doing?
Oh, thank you, Megan. Yes. So the number one place to find me is over on my podcast, the Live by Design podcast. Megan's a guest upcoming, so be sure to come check out our episode together. For that conversation. So the Live by Design podcast, because it's all about living life by design and not by default. And then everywhere else, I'm at Miss Kate House. There's another Kate House out there. She beat me to everything. So I'm MS Kate House, just like a house on Instagram. It's my website. And I would love to give your community. I hosted the Goals with Soul Summit in spring of 2024. And I'd love to give you guys a special coupon code so you can get the all access pass for free.
Wonderful. Oh, thank
Yeah.
you. Okay,
You get
we'll
all
put
the
all that info in the
episodes.
show notes for everybody, so you
Yeah.
can go grab that there.
Perfect. Yeah. So I'd love to give that to everybody. It's just, and they're all podcast episodes because I know we're women, we have full schedules, we're doing a lot. So put it in your earbud, listen to the episodes that resonate with you. And here's the thing, too, when it comes to overwhelm, grab the all access pass and don't expect yourself to listen to every episode. There's 24 in there. Just pick the top two or three that resonate
Yep.
with you. Trust that you're going to hear what you need. And that's a beautiful thing, right? Don't make this another thing on the proverbial to-do list.
Absolutely. Oh, beautiful. Thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate it.